Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:07. It's O'Connor and Company. Good morning. Thrilled you could join us. If you missed our first 2 hours, they were bangers. Subscribe to our podcast, O'Connor and Company. You'll get our full show and separated interviews broken down by the hour, delivered right to your device conveniently, pretty much within an hour of our show going off the air. So why not? That way you can be up to speed on everything that we're covering here in the unique way that we cover it. Also, coming up at 7:35, Andrew Kerr, investigative journalist over at Washington Free Beacon. They have a damning report on a story that Westmore's been telling his entire political career about his grandfather, great-grandfather, being chased out of South Carolina by the Klan. None of it appears to be true. We'll share that with you. Also at 8:05, we'll talk to a representative from the NRA about what Richmond is doing to your gun rights. It's Larry O'Connor with Cassie Smedlie. Good morning, Cassie.
Good morning, Larry.
And joining us right now is a friend of the program, great guy, Tim Graham, executive editor at Newsbusters over at Media Research Center, to talk about, well, Tim, I mean, honestly, we're talking, this is, Democrats like to say that January 6th was worse than September 11th, but I got to think now we've got a new date, February 4th, a day that will live in infamy.
No.
As the ownership of the Washington Post announced a whole series of layoffs. And I don't think our republic will survive, Tim. It's thank you for joining us to mourn this event.
Yes, I mean, obviously, Larry, we start with New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof, who tweeted yesterday, Jeff Bezos, who could keep the Wash Post a pillar of American democracy with the change dug out from his limousine seats, sets an example of surrender to authoritarianism for every other business person in America.
That seems a little over the top. But, it is telling that the progressive, radical, Marxist left here really do believe that rich people owe it to them, not to society, not to the country, not to civilization, but to them, the progressive left Marxists, to do their bidding with their money at their demand. That's really, and we've even seen it from Jamie Raskin and Don Beyer in Congress. They're trying to use their power and influence as congressmen to force Bezos to sell the Post rather than cut back.
This is exactly what's going on. Jeff Bezos, when he bought the Post, was sort of their dream. It's like Laurene Powell jobs. You take your billions and you help subsidize people who are trying to destroy capitalism. That's the way it's supposed to work. The bourgeoisie is supposed to hand over everything to the proletariat.
Oh, and it's too rich, pun intended, to look at this and to say, with the socialist policies trying to take hold in so many cities across America, and it's like, they're not going to work. It's going to be a failing model, but you still need to subsidize it, which is exactly what's playing out over at the Post.
And then you have, Marty Barron, the former executive editor there, when Bezos bought the paper, goes on PBS last night, and he was like, well, basically the whole disaster here is they failed to endorse Kamala Harris. They lost all of their readers because they're too pro-Trump now. Barron even claimed they don't have any left-wing columnists anymore at the Post. And I'm sure this morning David Ignatius and Max Boot are like, what?
That's hilarious. Oh, no, Max Boot's a conservative. Just ask him. Hey, so, Tim, so we sort of got ahead of the story here by talking about the over-the-top, ridiculous reaction to it. What really happened yesterday? Yes, there were some layoffs. It looks like they've ended the sports section, but some of these other superfluous people, I just saw that 12 people lost their jobs, either reporters or editors. They were all on the climate beat, not the Capitol Weather Gang, not the weather reporters. These are the people who just talked about greenhouse gases and climate. Are you kidding me? 12 people were employed on that beat at the Washington Post?
Yeah, well, look, they think that's what the most important story is because, back in 1990, they said we had 10 years left. So Somebody's got to keep dishing that out.
I guess you do assign some reporters to that story, I suppose. But how deep were these cuts? And they're not going. The Washington Post isn't going away. It sounds like they're just trying to be another version of Politico.
Yeah, that's exactly. Curtis Houck made that point yesterday. It's like when you remove sports, you remove books. This is where you're like, you don't get this whole surrender to authoritarianism thing, because it's like, okay, so they cut the sports section so Donald Trump's dictatorship goes on. I'm trying to understand the logic.
That's true.
Well, it's just that they cut, as we were talking about earlier, the sports section. Wait, Larry, what'd you point out? The front page of the sports section yesterday was about an Excel challenge.
About a competition to make Excel spreadsheets. Yeah.
Yes.
On the week of the Super Bowl, that was their coverage.
Mm-hmm. So God forbid someone be like, maybe we didn't get this right.
They don't have much local coverage anymore anyway. I noticed a couple weeks ago that the March for Life, they've got tens of thousands of pro-lifers in Washington, D.C., and they didn't cover it. But they did put on the front page with a color photo, protests in Minneapolis. So,
yes.
it's they're still pitch perfect over there, pitch perfect progressive.
What's interesting to me, though, is, and Tim, this sort of is a larger question in terms of the business of media, the business of journalism. You would think that with the ideological perspective the Washington Post has embraced and tripled and quadrupled down on, in any major metropolis where it could succeed, it would be this one. That the Washington, D.C. area would continue to support what in other markets would be a failing business proposition. Mm-hmm. What really went wrong here? Is it just ideological, or is the place sort of run in a very 20th century way in a 21st century reality?
Well, Bezos bought the paper to some extent to try to answer that question. Can I bring my business genius to this? This is why, as you suggest, it's going to be more like Politico, because that's what the D.C. area audience probably wants to learn. And they want to know what's going on, for policy wonks. So, they're not really cutting back on the policy coverage. I guess, obviously when you get rid of a bunch of your bureau chiefs abroad, obviously this was a decision based on what clicks and what does not click. So they were sort of like, well, the guy that reports from Cairo isn't getting clicks, and we would like international coverage. But, now in today's age in Google, when you want to know what's going on in Egypt or India, you go into Google and you get the Egyptian media sources. It's just it is a different world.
Is this a warning sign for, I think of like CBS and Barry Weiss and what they're trying to do to bring it back to what the viewers want, except the rot from within is protesting that and standing against that. So is this a signal for what's to come for these other traditional media institutions that suffering from the same issues as the Post, but their problem is their own people are standing in their way? Or do you think it's different?
Well, there's definitely this whole idea where, you have this whole cadre of people from Oliver Darcy to David Folkenflik and Brian Stelter, who the whole problem is the media is not liberal enough. So they're basically doubling down on the thing that drives away like 60% of their audience. So that's an issue. But there's also, just a whole larger picture. Now, I always bring this back to my son, Ben, who's 35, who doesn't read newspapers. He doesn't, listen to broadcast radio. He doesn't watch television in a broadcast sense.
That's just bad parenting right there, Tim.
Yeah. Well, when he's in my car, he does.
There you go.
But this is the problem they have is like the under 35s, they're not using any of these things. And that's the problem they're going to have. And I don't know how they solve that problem.
It's funny. You make such a funny point here because I'm in the media. And I'm in traditional media. You don't get much, other than newspapers, broadcast radio is right there, right? Second oldest to print newspapers. And yet, it's funny. We focus on local stories here on this show, We think that you can't tell me that it's not newsworthy and compelling content when you've got Richard Cox in Northern Virginia and the Fairfax County School Board and Loudoun County School Board and Montgomery County School Board. There's an audience for it. There are other radio stations in this town who cover local stories as well. Nick Minnock has done a great job at WJLA local television covering this stuff. Fox 5 does a great job covering local stories. I think the Washington Post didn't do that anymore because they were bored. They were personally uninterested. The path for success for reporters and editors in this town is to cover politics. That's how they get their TV contracts. That's how they get the next big gig. I think they were just bored with that content, and so they ignored it for their own personal bottom line.
Well, I still kind of think it feels like a Babylon Bee article that a guy that's wandering into women's bathrooms and exposing himself is named Cox, but that's just me.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. We try to dabble in a little bit of the Imus thing, but when you go full Howard Stern on me, we gotta put you in the doghouse now, at least for a couple of days. Tim Graham, Media Research Center. Who knew he would go blue? Thank you. Not to mention his first name is Richard. It's 7:17. I don't think there's anything quite more Gen X than saying the Shamwow guy, and everybody of my generation knows exactly who you're talking about, and actually could probably recite part of the infomercial. Now you're technically a millennial, but you know you're all over Shamwow, right?
Oh yes, this ran our summers. It was all over summertime TV. And so for everyone saying, I just want the 90s back, the 90s nostalgia, he's got a lane. He's got a lane to success.
Yes.
Appealing to that voting base.
And by he, we're talking about Vince Shlomi, known everywhere as the Shamwow guy, who made a huge announcement yesterday on social media. Let's listen to it. Cut 5, please.
Hey, it's Vince. I'm running for Congress against this guy. Stop having a politician that's worse than Biden.
For discretionary funding.
Instead, vote for me, a guy who's not half dead. I'm going to soak up the swamp, clean the house, and pick up those liberal tears at the same time. I'm going to slap chop the nuts out of the woke, making less blue-haired commies and more red-blooded Americans. Vote for me so I can represent you and the ones that can't stand up for themselves.
Vote for Shamwow!
Paid for by offer bid Shamwow Shlomi for Congress.
By the way, when he says the ones who can't stand up for themselves, he goes to an ultrasound and shows a little unborn baby turn to the camera and say, vote for Vince. So he's a total pro-life right-winger, MAGA Republican from Texas. He's running in the 31st Congressional District against incumbent John Carter, who, did not come across very flattering in that video there. He's 84 years old. That said, he's got the power of incumbency. He's going to have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But I got to tell you something. I know you're skeptical because you know how the, campaign finances work and everything. And he's an institution, John Carter. He's 84 years old. And Vince, the Shamwow guy, I'm telling you, he has a shot.
Listen, never count anybody out. I've learned that after 2016. And this guy might be the best marketer since Donald Trump.
Exactly.
He understands what gets people to tune in, turn
That's
out.
right.
So I'm not counting him out, but I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy watching it.
This was so jarring for me when it flew by on my X feed because you got to do a double take because it's Vince. He's got the hair sort of, with the bangs straight up, kind of thing. He's got a little more salt and pepper going on in his hair, of course. He's wearing the headset.
The headset microphone he is wearing, and he's got the 3/4 turn to the camera with his eyebrow arched. Hey, it's Vince, the Shamwow guy. Everything about it. The polo shirt. It's the exact look. It's the same vibe, the same high energy, the same direct engagement with the camera and the quick cuts. It's perfect for social media. And then he holds up a picture of John Carter. Again, I've never met Congressman Carter. I'm sure he's a fine gentleman. I want people who reach 84 years old to retire and spend time with their wives and their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. I'm sorry. That's a thing that I have about congressmen. It's like, you've done enough. Go enjoy, sit under your fig tree and drink from the vine. Okay. It's time to relax. The visuals in this ad are amazing. Also, again, if you've wondered what Vince Shlomi
the Shamwow guy has been doing in the last, 25 years. He's been creating content for the internet, including what is pinned on his account right now, which is a parody on the transgender issue of men invading women's spaces, where, I just can tell you it is over the top.
Worth the watch.
It's worth the watch. It's definitely for adults. Don't let your kids watch it. But it's like, if you watch it, it's like, I can imagine Steven Crowder looking at it and saying, dude, that's too much. Right.
Well, it definitely is a jarring start. But Heather Hunter, our producer, she thought that should have been his announcement ad. Not suitable for TV, but it gets to the point.
You're learning something about Heather that I've known for quite some time. Right on the edge. She is married to Derek Hunter, after all. It's 7:23. If you're trying to sell your home, by the way, 100% official endorsement from Larry O'Connor, Shamwow guy for Congress. It's the only race I care about now. I'm sorry. I want Shamwow guy in this town. I want a regular hit with him on the show. Yes. Shamwow guy for Congress.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:37. It's O'Connor and Company, and Cassie Smedlie still has Christmas decorations out in front of her house.
Tell me I'm not the only one. The snow and ice really messed us up.
Excuse me, the snow and ice came 10 days ago. You could have gotten them down before the snow and ice came, right?
If kids are still out of school, I can still have my Christmas decorations up, Larry.
All right. It's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on your lazy, good-for-nothing husband.
Who still has their Christmas tree up, Larry?
That's different. That's different. Coming up at 7:05, Tim. Oh, no, wait. We've already got Tim Graham. And we've got Andrew Kerr right now. Coming up at 8:05. I just went back in time. John Comerford from the NRA talk about Democrats in Virginia trying to infringe on your Second Amendment rights. All right, Cassie Smedlie, let's get Andrew Kerr in here, award-winning investigative reporter for the Washington Free Beacon. You've done it again, Andrew. I don't know. I'm shocked to hear that Governor Wes Moore may have over-exaggerated his history. Oh, no, wait a second, Andrew. He's got a long track record of doing this, doesn't he?
Oh, it's incredible. I've been reporting for about a decade now. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. It's everything. The lies are just extraordinary.
Yeah. We can do a wrap-up of all the lies that have already been exposed about Wes Moore's fabulous penchant for exaggerating his past, which, by the way, is remarkable to me because he seems like a really great politician. He's really good at sort of, delivering messages. He's like, why do you have to lie about this? It's a sign of insecurity or maybe something deeper. Tell me about this latest one that is absolutely explosive, what you've discovered here about his story he told about his great-grandfather.
Yeah, so he has a story. This is like the centerpiece of his stump speech in 2022, where his grandfather was 6 years old, had to flee Charleston in the 1920s, South Carolina, because his father was a prominent black minister, angered the Ku Klux Klan with his sermons condemning racism. They had to escape in the middle of the night. Moore says his great-grandfather, committed the crime of being black in the South. Moore's grandfather, vowed to return to America, where he raised Wes Moore, who became Maryland's first black governor. So inspiring story.
Great story.
It's not true. I looked into it. It's not true.
Details.
I went to the archives down in South Carolina. I confirmed that Moore's great-grandfather, his name was the Reverend Josiah Johnson Thomas. He did preach at an Episcopal church in Pineville, South Carolina from 1922 to December 1924. And then he made a orderly and public transfer to Jamaica, his home country, in December of 1924, just 1 week after a prominent Jamaican pastor named Reverend George Lewis Young died unexpectedly at his home. So when this Reverend Young died, like 3,000 people attended his funeral. The governor of Jamaica, several members of its governing body, sent in, telegrams expressing their sorrow that they couldn't attend. This was a big deal. 1 week after his death, Moore's great-grandfather gets a transfer to Jamaica, which was a formalized process that required approval from several different parties. And then upon his return to Jamaica, he was appointed to succeed the late Reverend Young. And then he appears to have had a great career in Jamaica up until his death in 1960. The church that Moore's great-grandfather worked in Pineville before his transfer, the only reporting on the church is that it had, at the time, is that it had great relationships with the white community. They talk about in 1924, the year of the transfer to Jamaica, that the church had hired this nurse to provide services to the black community. And the state church of South Carolina reported that, like, yeah, the white community is like really in favor of this work. And then in 1925, the year later, they reported that the, quote, colored work at this particular church is in a, quote, most prosperous condition. There's just no evidence at all that this church had any sort of conflict with the white community, nor the KKK, which didn't have a chapter operating within like 80 miles of this town.
Wow.
So it's just like, there's an extraordinary amount of historical documentation on Moore's great-grandfather. It was surprising, like, that I just kept on finding all this stuff about the guy, but there's nothing about this story about the KKK or that he was like this prominent racial equality preacher. Like, the core elements of Moore's story are just not true. The characters are there, but the actual, like, what he talks about is just not supported by the historical documentation at all.
First of all, good on you for doing a little journalism. Although, as you lay it out, and I'm sure it was more work, you're making it sound easy. But it's like, why did everyone else miss this? Although I would say it was probably willfully missed this. And as you're telling the story, I'm like, that in and of itself is a good story to tell. If you actually wanted to talk about being someone who has a record in their family of unifying communities and working in the communities, there is a good story.
Yeah.
Why the persistent divisive story? I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but Andrew, we've been talking this morning about how the Washington Post has officially gone away from covering local news, but they've been yielding that or ceding that or ignoring that for quite some time. And I guess you're picking up this vacuum, right? I mean, just give more of your thoughts on why is no one else covering this story other than the obvious answers?
Yeah, well, I think it's also, like, I'd like to note, I had a follower, he posted this on Twitter yesterday, and I think it's a great point, but he said that, like, lying about racism, which is what it appears Moore did here, it's not a victimless crime. He calculated that smearing the whole community of South Carolina would be politically popular, and like, he was right. Like, this was like the core part of his stump speech, and yeah, that when I was researching the story, like, I had the same thought process, like, this is actually kind of like, looks like an inspiring story. Like, his great-grandfather looks like he had a good career in South Carolina, did some good work, and then, transferred back to his home country. So yeah, I mean, I have to pat my own back here, like, or toot my own horn. Like, this was a really hard story to put together. I worked for most of December, for most of January on this, but yeah, I mean, this is what I'm lucky, blessed to be able to do this for a living.
Sounds like there was really a pretty solid paper trail to go off of, Andrew. Andrew Kerr, Washington Free Beacon. He said he grew up in Baltimore. He didn't. He said he was in the Maryland College Football Hall of Fame. There is no Maryland College Football Hall of Fame. Of course, we've talked about his Bronze Star claims forever. He claimed that he was a foremost expert on radical Islam, but his thesis was never submitted to Oxford University, and there's no record of him being a doctoral candidate. And Oxford refuses to talk about it. He said he had a difficult childhood in the Bronx and Baltimore, but he grew up in New York City and went to an elite private school that John F. Kennedy went to. There seems to be a pattern of behavior here. Has the governor's office responded to this article at all?
No. So I reached out to them over 2 weeks ago. They didn't address any of the reporting, and said they just strongly insinuate that I'm a racist for daring to question this story. And I think that's how a compulsive liar, is, in line to secure a second term as Maryland's governor, and possibly, as expected, run for president in 2028, have a serious go at it. Is that anytime any reporter like kind of catches on to like, hey, this guy he's weaving a tale, the response is that, oh, well, the insinuation that we're going to call you a racist. And I'm just
it can't
so
be,
thankful
exactly.
that I work for a news outlet that is not intimidated by like cheap tactics like that. Because I mean, I don't think anyone's like denying that it was tough to be black in the South in the 1920s. Like there's no denying that. But I'm looking into a particular person and their particular experiences. And there's a great deal of documentation on this particular person. And the story, it just doesn't support, the story that he's presenting, at all.
And it's not like Andrew Kerr in the Washington Free Beacon woke up one day and said, you know what, let's just explore the history of Wes Moore and figure out what happened to his great-great-grandfather. No, and then decide to tell a story about that. You were specific. Wes Moore bragged about this story. It was part of his campaign stump speech. He's the one who invented this. So, of course, it invites some scrutiny. Usually, it's supposed to, at least. So there's nothing racist about saying, oh, the story you're telling about your great-grandfather, it's a lie. If that's racist, then journalism is racist. But, that'll be the headline tomorrow from the Washington Post. Andrew, great work as always. You guys rock.
Thanks, Larry.
We're going to leave it there. Sadly, this and the Shamwow guy are the two stories I was obsessed with all night last night while I was lying in bed. It's Larry O'Connor with Cassie Smedlie. Yesterday we talked about the mayor of Baltimore who yelled at a reporter for asking about the outrageous money that he's spending on a special Jeep Grand Cherokee Wagoneer SUV when the old one was only 2 years old. Called the reporter racist, you'll remember. Here, cut 6 here. Let's just, no, that's severe right wing. Here, cut 9 is when he called the reporter racist.
Well, you looked at, I understand that. I did answer the question. Just because you didn't get the answer that you wanted in your racist slant, there's one thing.
There you go. That's when you're the mayor of Baltimore, you can do that. Okay, well, here's the latest out of our mayor from Baltimore. As he's fighting off allegations of corruption with taxpayer dollars going to his sweet new ride, it's also now been revealed that he has a baby mama who has a defunct nonprofit that got $100,000 in taxpayer funds while they were dating. $80,000 of it coming one day after they publicly announced their relationship. That's a sweet deal.
That just sounds like a coincidence, Larry. I don't know why you're always jumping to conclusions. You're racist.
President of the nonprofit was awarded $80,000 to Mayor Scott's now wife. They're married now, who earns over $300,000 a year, and was pictured with Mrs. Scott at a Beyonce concert last summer. Mrs. Scott's nonprofit is delinquent in filing their tax returns, failed to disclose Mrs. Scott's salary, and was sued and evicted for not paying rent.
Wow.
Mayor of Baltimore, or dare I say, the next governor of Maryland. That would be Brandon Scott. I mean, he's got all of the, 7:53.